So this panel is basically just an overview of what the market is looking at the minute. We've got an excellent panel here. And before we jump into it, let's let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kevin Walsh. I'm the second Irish person on this panel today, which is unusual for me. I'm MD of
Irish passports here.
Yes, we're not banned from Europe. I'm the MD of Cara here in APAC, based in Singapore.
I'm Zachary King. I'm the first Australian on this panel so far. I'm at MediaMath and I look after basically rest of Asia, which is take all the good markets out of APAC and I get what's left.
And I'm, that's a good one. Ryan Pistano, I'm the new general manager for iPon Web in Asia.
Hi everyone, Damien Cummings. There's not a lot of claims to fame left, so I'm not Irish, but I am Australian, so I'm the second person, but I'm the only client here. So I'm the global head of digital marketing at Standard Chartered. So yeah, I'll talk about money, you guys can talk about tech.
We are delighted to have you here, Damien.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So let's start with some of the trends that Rachel talked about, particularly this convergence of ad tech and martech. Now, we've had numerous conversations with some people over the last week about this particular convergence. You're seeing all these martech companies buying into ad tech, and you're seeing some of them going the other way as well. So let's talk about this split in the camp, because we've seen the Lumascapes of the martech ecosystem, and it is horrendous. There's like 1,900 companies. You thought ad tech was bad. Martech is a shit show in comparison. So let's just talk about this first of all, Kevin. What's your perspective? And from an agency perspective, how do you see these two worlds coming together? And what are the sort of overall trends you're seeing?
Well, I think they always were sort of together anyway. I think it's only when we come to, say, conferences like this that the spotlight gets shined on it maybe a little bit more than it would. But I've always been of the mind that advertising tech is just a subset of marketing tech anyway. And many of the smart marketing clients out there, smart agency people, would already have thought that anyway. Particularly now as more marketers, and I'm sure Damien will have a thought on this, understand that data is more important. And where are you going to get good data from? You're going to get that from your advertising tech stack. So I think as more and more clients begin to understand that, more and more agencies understand that, the advertising tech stack and the marketing tech stack will become subsets of each other.
Zachary?
Yeah, just to pick up on that, totally agree. I think it's basically the flip side of the same coin. And the convergence there will lead to, ultimately, a much better view for marketers to have an end-to-end view, which would allow them to get bi-directional data flow, both in and out, if you're using an open stack, of course, and then to activate the ultimate programmatic dream of hitting the right message to the right person at the right time, whether that's via email or display or whatever that looks like.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it's, the thing that really differentiates the two is really around the identities that you have, right? So the identity that you have in MarTech versus the identity that you have in ad tech and the way they kind of come together. And I think, the acquisition of telcos really looking into it, tap ad, the cross-device partners, the way they're kind of converging now is really about bringing those two together, right? Because you have different profiles in each stack, right? Like you have a different profile in MarTech, you have a different profile in ad tech, which is non-PII. And how do you bridge those two together and bring it together so that you have a kind of single view of your customer?
Okay. Damien, I've read some of your posts. They're very good, actually. Does a convergence help you as a marketer, or does it just make the situation even worse than it is?
Well, I think for me it's a different perspective altogether. It's not really about MarTech, ad tech, or anything else. It's about how do you make my life easy. On average, I'll get between 1 to 5 approaches by a technology company or agency every day. So that's between, say, 20 to 30 every week. I just don't.
Do you have somebody on board who manages all that? Surely you don't reply to all those emails.
That's called Damien Cummings. He manages himself. Yeah. So I'm my own secretary in this.
You have a chat bot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the challenge is keeping up, and I think whatever you can do to consolidate that to make it easier, but also put it in the language of marketers, that makes a lot of sense. Frankly, at the end of the day, we don't really care about ads. What we do care about is customers. We care about engaging those customers, and we care about revenue. So whatever technology platform, and data is a big part of this, whatever tech platform helps us do that, that's what we're interested in hearing about, but not at the rate of 5 a day.
Do you think there's a disconnect there? I mean, between what your objectives are and what we're trying to offer, basically, in terms of sort of service, etc. Because you probably you get 5 to 10 requests a week. Are they actually speaking your language, or is there a disconnect there?
There's a big disconnect. I think if to answer that first question, yes, we're talking two wildly different things. If I look at a Standard Charter perspective, and Nolisa will also validate this a little bit later when she's on the next panel, we spend roughly 50% of our spend in digital. Out of that, it's about 50% through programmatic. The rest goes into things like search, content, some direct buys, but generally, wherever we can be programmatic, we are. And we look at the overall marketing technology stack, and we think, well, you know what, that's probably not that important anymore. You know, it's more, this kind of conversation is more what you need to have with your agencies to figure out how we can do things cheaply. You know, what I'm not hearing is an ad tech company coming to me and saying, I'm going to get you 1 million more customers. What they are saying to me is, I can get them 20% cheaper. So what it is this kind of conversation gets us into a defensive marketing budget conversation, rather than the real conversation we want to have is, how do we grow?
Right, so how do we help Damien here? The convergent thing's interesting, right? It means that there's less, more complexity, but two words are brought together, but there is still this disconnect between what we do, in many ways, and what marketers want. So how do we sort of help that? We'll talk with the agency first, because they're, hand-holding the client.
I think we have to stop selling clients faster widgets or shinier widgets. You know, it's not about the fact that you're quicker or smarter or better. It's that it is a solution that actually drives growth. I've never met a client that didn't want growth. The 20% cheaper argument, look, it's an easy sell sometimes, and I think we have to stay away from that. But I think what we're trying to do from a car perspective when we talk to clients now is not talk about media at all, and talk about the business problems that they're actually being faced with. I think we need to change the conversation now, because if you're selling me a piece of technology and you say it's faster, it's better, it's quicker, well, it's not going to be that tomorrow. So I'm not going to buy it today, because it's not going to be that tomorrow. If you sell me a solution that's going to help me and therefore my clients grow, then I'm interested to hear from you.
Right. I mean, IPONWeb build tech for everybody, particularly marketers. Yeah. So how do you sort of bridge that gap then?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends, right? Because and I'm new to IPONWeb, but just kind of hearing the history of the types of client sets that we've had, right? Kind of from the venture-funded startups to now more kind of enterprise level, or kind of different types of people that are wanting tech, right? And I think we're seeing it evolve the right way. I think it's no longer about, okay, let's build another DSP or another SSP. It's now more about, okay, how do we actually take our data and get a better view of the customer and actually talk more to them about sales and service, right? And kind of go beyond marketing and say, okay, let's talk about retention. Let's talk about getting a higher average revenue per user, right? So like really looking at that and talk about retention, and not just about, okay, let's get another conversion so we can sell them some more. So I think it's starting to shift.
Exactly. The conversation with clients is now about how do we sell more stuff? How do we make more money? Not like how do we make media cheaper? It's just how do we shift stuff off the shelves? If Damien's looking for new customers and he employs, works with ad tech companies like yourselves, he's want to know, if I invest X, what will my output be and why?
Totally, and look, one of the issues that we're facing, I think, is there is a little bit of siloing going on. So we've got client, agency, trade desk perhaps, and then tech vendor sitting at the end. And particularly with education is a key piece there. The education isn't evenly distributed. So I think that's an area where if we can all be sitting at the table and again, bringing back that focus to what are we trying to achieve for the client, what's the outcomes we want to drive here, and then finding out whatever the solution and whatever the services are that fit best for that.
Yeah. It's just, the other thing as well, Kevin, is that we seem to have so much tech in this space, and Damien will probably attest to it as well. There is so much tech. There's email, there's, DMPs, DSPs, the layers of complexity are there. I mean, is it a case that we actually have so much tech and nobody knows how to use it, right? And this is a reality. I sit at some events and there's like School of Programmatic and all this for people who are, how do we use this? Like how do I actually make this useful for my business? So is there still this inability to use it properly in many ways? Are we still sort of at that level where we have tech but we don't know how to use it?
To tell a story behind this, I worked on a search optimization tool a few years back. Won't name names. A very good one. Don't get me wrong, very good one. And we gave all our people access to it, as you would. We trained everybody on it. We gave all our clients access to it. But we were able to track which pieces of the functionality people were actually using. And very soon after a real spike in usage across everything, we saw there was only maybe 2 or 3 pieces of functionality that people were using out of maybe 10 or 15. And I don't think that was because they were daft. I don't think it was because they were stupid in any way. I just think they didn't have the time. And I think where you'll see with good agencies versus bad agencies is good agencies their people will find the time to use every single piece of technology that they have. But I think you've got to be selective because you can't be a generalist when it comes to technology. And I think you've got to pick 3 or 4 pieces of kit and use them to their optimum level and not try and spread yourself too thin because you just don't have time to.
Damien, what's your view on that? There is a lot of moving parts to this MarTech, AdTech stack. How does a marketer like yourself actually manage all that?
Yeah, I mean, a good example is that Standard Chartered, we've had a tool historically called Sprinkler. It's a social listening and content tool. Out of 400 marketers worldwide, only 6 people use it. Not because they haven't been trained on it, it's because for those people, it's part of their core job for reputation management and to update some content management systems and some social networks. If you look at it, there's actually a couple of issues. Training doesn't work because generally you train people up on the tool. After that tool training, they go back to their day job. What we're trying to do now is actually change everything by putting a foundation layer in we call a marketing academy, which is training up in 4 areas. 1, what is the general tool? So it might be what is media planning and buying or what is programmatic buying. People need that base level of language and to understand what it is. Second, we go through tool training. So we're rolling that out now. So for every kind of competency we have, such as brand management, media planning, campaign planning, and so on, we'll have between 3 to 5 tools internally. Then we have to actually go into the Standard Chartered way of working training. Now, this is where most people fall down. You have to have a process and force people to adhere to that process. So if I've trained up on people on how to do programmatic buying, therefore they've got to use it in a certain process and that's it. They can't do anything else. And finally, once you do that, you've got to actually train up their objectives and give them new KPIs. So it's forced and it's mandatory. So unfortunately, in 20 plus years of doing this, whenever there's a new piece of technology, I found unless you systematically force people to use it, change their KPIs and go through that pain period of actually getting used to the new way of working, it will inevitably fail. So you've got to put that program like that in place.
What's your process then for selecting tech, like in terms of your business? I mean, you get pitched all the time. How do you choose to use what you use? I mean, if it's a new piece of technology, you have to test it, and then you got to train people to use it. And it's like then another piece of kit comes along saying we can do better things than that last piece of kit. So how do you stop running around in circles and falling over?
Well, just to make it more complicated, every time we buy a new piece of kit, we've got to get rid of the last one. So generally, that's also on a contract, and we've trained up 500 people to use that. Then we've got to get rid of that, and everyone gets really upset with it. So it really. So I think it's a fast and loose process, to be honest. What I generally do now is actually tell people our strategy, show them what we need to do this year, what kind of KPIs we have for the next couple of years, and then say to them, how can you help me? And often you can't have one tech solution that fixes everything. Often it's 5 or 6 that need to fix one problem. So if I need to acquire 1 million new customers a year, no one tool can do that for me. I need email marketing, CRM, I need some ad tech that's going to help me with programmatic buying, I'm going to have all this other stuff out there. So it's a process which actually is very poorly managed. I think we have a makings of a tech plan, because you need a marketing plan now, a technology plan as well. Have a look at where your contracts start and stop. Have someone to actually manage your marketing technology. Also figure out how risky the change is. So even if there is an amazing piece of kit that comes out there that's 20 times better than what I currently have, is it worth my time and my reputation going in and actually pissing off everyone in my organization, getting rid of the last piece of kit?
It's a brave move, though.
Well, it can be, but here's the opportunity. Focus on the change management aspect of this. If you're an agency, if you're a tech vendor, come in and tell me how I can onboard. Not tell me how much the training costs, but help me sell in the process. Help me get rid of the last piece of technology. Tell me when you're going to be obsolete. Then kind of give me a roadmap over the next 12, 18, 24 months of how the technology landscape is going to change. Then help me go in and actually tell people that it's going to be a new piece of kit.
And how do you, is that something that's missing at the minute? Do you think that a lot of the vendors are not having the capabilities to do that?
Have you seen anyone do it before?
No.
Exactly. Yeah, no one does it. That's what marketers tend to do on our side, but again, it's not our skill set. Marketers tend to be people who get stuck in millions of internal meetings. We get stuck doing all this change management stuff. We're left with the dirty laundry of tech vendors and agencies. And
So-
I think you're going to get a few more emails today.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Damien.
Oh, you're going to get spammed. So does this mean that, this is interesting because like obviously marketers now, their roles have become much more complex. We've seen the rise of chief martech and CTMOs and all that kind of stuff. The service, the relationship between agency tech vendors seems to be changing. How important is that now, Ryan, to sort of to change? Because it feels to me that our space has become even more complex than it was, right? The role of the marketer is completely changing in terms of what they do now because of all the new channels, particularly digital, and all the fragmentation in the space and all the technology that they use. So that relationship between agency technology and marketer is completely changed. How do you see that evolving?
No, I think it's weird because it's evolving pretty rapidly, and the agencies a lot of times have to, do the vendor selection and go through that and then feed it in properly into the client. The client, like you said, like most marketing people I've met and kind of enterprise clients, what they do is actually manage internally and try to sell in and try to get people to buy in on, like getting a DMP on board, for example, right? It's a very complicated process because the client basically has to own it. The agency is involved from a media buying perspective, and I think that's a perfect kind of use case. And when you look at that relationship and how that evolves, because then that also has to tie into the media buying platforms, and the media buying platforms then get limited depending on the DMPs that and how they're kind of all integrated and interconnected, and then it gets really, really complex, right? So I think from a from a tech vendor perspective, what I think we need to do a little bit better is one, that user experience on how this all comes together needs to get a lot better. But also, I think the machine learning needs to really keep up and be able to because if you're running a DMP, you could have a million different definitions of audiences, right? And which one do you target, which and or not? Right, so that's really complicated. If you have machine learning to kind of help a user along to make sure that it's actually optimized and it's working properly, I think that's where, as a technology company, I think that's where we need to start really to focus and bring on that machine learning that can do that optimization.
Zachary, should David just use Google and make his life easier?
Search for something.
Yeah. No, but it just feels to me that it should have just a full stack that does everything be the easiest solution. Like we're like, as Ryan attested there, we have such a pockmark of an ecosystem, and some of the different technologies don't talk to each other. Some of them don't even have fucking APIs to integrate. So like, I mean, it's an absolute mess. So would it be better off just getting one big all singing, all dancing stack to do everything?
I mean, that's obviously the dream, if it's an open system, of course. But
no media.
You talk about the Lumascape. I think winter is coming. There is going to be huge.
Winter's been coming it's not coming here. It's fucking. I'm sweating here at 4 o'clock in the morning and turn the air conditioning on.
It was barely 34 this morning. No, so I think there's definitely a move towards a full stack, and it has to be open because you have to have technology that talks to each other, and so as part of that, you need to have, again, coming back to that agency vendor relationship, you need to have much better communication and you need to have much better education. I think that's a theme that will come up again and again today. And you should definitely, both agency and client should be leaning heavily on their vendors to provide education. And I'm sure everyone's got an example of that. But to give you some context, ours is called New Marketing Institute. And of the 12 modules that we have, 10 are platform agnostic, as in they're not talking about what MediaMath can do. They're talking about digital marketing. They're talking about programmatic very generally. So I think that's definitely somewhere that both agency and client should be leaning pretty heavily on their vendors.
Kevin, would you be a full stack man? Would you like? Where do you stand on the whole full stack?
Look, I'd love to think that there's a single provider out there that will be
There's
best
about,
of
there's about
class.
4 vendors here today who'll probably talk about it later on. That we have a full stack. So
That would be best in class in every single thing that they offer. But I think that the pace of change that we have in the business probably prohibits that from happening. I also think just some of the guys were talking about the relationship between agency, client, and tech vendor. I think that's kind of changed a little bit now because there are some parts of the technology stack that we have that clients don't want, and they'll have a direct relationship with tech partners. And I think if you're an agency person, you can't be naive to that. You have to embrace that actually and understand that what you're selling isn't exactly what the client's going to want to buy. So you need to be able to partner with other people. So I think that the notion of a full tech stack is a nice one, but I think it's more fluid.
But do you think it's the aspiration of all these MarTech vendors, right? We have IBM, we have Salesforce, we have Oracle, we have Adobe, right? Who have aspirations, who've acquired email, have acquired probabilistic modeling tools. Now they're looking this way and thinking we want that full thing. Is that going to happen? Do you think more of these companies are going to buy into our space? Do you think they're going to try and push that stack?
I think for some clients who are starting off, then that's going to be a really nice, simple solution. I think as you evolve more, you get to know, well, actually, I don't want that particular function that you have, or I want something better. Then they're going to open it up and they're going to want to create a more bespoke, tailored stack. But for clients who are only dipping their toe now, I think go with one partner, do it. Like, don't complicate it, just do it.
Damien, you must get harangued by the MarTech cloud. Yeah. How do you feel about the press the green button and it does everything?
It doesn't exist. I mean, to Kevin's point, there's no kind of best-in-class all around. But I do want to make another point about the relationship side. And I think it's important to understand this. I don't trust tech vendors. Marketers don't. We never will.
Why is that?
Close the doors.
They're good people.
Doesn't mean we won't have a drink with you, but we don't trust you. So you probably steal my wallet at the end of the night. But if you look at, we trust agencies. I trust Kevin. You know,
I trust Kevin. He's very trustworthy. He's Irish.
Someone's videotaping this, yes? Yeah, okay, excellent.
But having said that, so marketers trust their agencies because agencies are generally perceived as relatively impartial. And also, they're generally perceived as the outsourced marketing team. So we trust them. And they have that trust, and they don't often realize they have that trust. It's often abused, but generally, there's a high level of trust between clients and agencies. Both sides.
It's like a backhanded compliment. Gives it
You
one
suck,
hand,
but we
takes the
like
other.
you, yeah. No, agencies are great. I mean, we trust them. But I think when it comes to technology, the reason we don't trust tech vendors and we don't believe there's one green button that gives us everything is because you only sell the feeds and speeds, the functional specs. You know what? We also know you're going to be obsolete in 6 months. But all you're trying to do is get your commission out of us. What you're doing is giving me a kind of cold email that says, hey, Damien, check out my XXXY marketing stack. Right?
Yeah, but I would cut across, Damien. Not all vendors are that way. I mean, in fairness, there's legacy companies like Google, Facebook, Oracle. All these guys are building tech for the long term. Like they're not trying to flip their companies. They're
And we've met now, so it wouldn't be a cold email.
and obviously MediaMath, sorry, which are trying to flip their company. So there are exceptions to the rule.
No. I have to trust Google and Facebook. I have to. But we got into bed together because it was a bit of an arranged marriage. You can't not get out of bed with those guys. So it's like a forced trust. Agencies you choose.
An arranged marriage.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can work out great. There can be love there as well, but generally it's a bit of an arranged marriage. Agencies, you're still dating. It's hopefully you get engaged and hopefully you get married. Tech vendors
And then you get
generally
divorced a few years
Would you
later.
say the tech vendors are a one-night stand?
Well, no, there's this sleazy guy in the bar that's trying to hit on you. So maybe they're the one-night stand, but yeah.
Right. Okay. But other exceptions to the rule. I mean, DMPs, particularly the connecting tissue between MarTech and AdTech, and there's some marketers who are very protective of the first-party data. Is that where that obviously Convergence is? Like, there's certain pieces of technology that you will need internally that to protect marketer data.
Yeah, look, I think and again, it goes back to my point earlier about clients having direct relationships with tech partners. The first-party data and a DMP is probably that chunk of technology that I would see a lot of the smarter clients wanting to own themselves, because partners will come and go. It's a terrible thing. Agencies will come and go. Tech partners will come and go. But that first-party data they want to keep. They want to make sure it's there, it's accessible, and it is in a place that they can use it, whoever partner that they have in the future. So absolutely, that piece of technology, I think a lot of clients would be investing in that.
Zachary, you've got a DMP, haven't you?
Yes, we do.
Is that the piece of technology that a lot of clients will have those initial conversations with you?
So for MediaMath, it's a relatively new addition. We've just come out of closed beta, so it's not usually the leading conversation, but certainly the conversation around moving to the full customer view from end to end, and completely agree that the data is absolutely where clients should be looking, and to retain control of that, because that allows you to reach out at every step along there using your different parts of your stack. So 100% agree that it's key.
Right.
And you'll see more and more of it.
Ryan, you obviously work with a lot of client direct as well. Is that a piece of tech that they are coveting?
Yeah, I think they're starting to really dig into what does the DMP actually do for them, right? And then what does data ownership really mean? Because when you're on somebody else's domain on a DMP, right? If you're on Google.com or somebody else's domain, is that data really yours? So kind of the first party question comes into play. Right? And I think that's why some direct enterprises are really looking at, all right, what does it really mean for me to have data ownership, right? What does that, and they go through, I've been through RFP processes, not with iPhone, but previous companies where, you go through 80-page documentation of, here are our requirements from a security perspective, and go through that. So I think it's and I think from a kind of ad tech startup world, we're not ready for that type of thing, right? When a bank goes up to us and asks us, are you ISO 27001 certified? You just kind of, you're deer in headlights, right? So I think that's the stuff that we're going to start to.
Do you think that's something we need to be pushing a little bit more? That type of standardization for clients, is that something we're going to see more and more pushing towards?
I think there will be. I think it will start to do that, because banks have certain requirements, telcos have certain requirements on how they handle their data. Privacy, rules are still fairly nebulous, especially here in APAC, right? Australia's a little bit better. The Philippines is, you don't really know, and at least Singapore we have the PDPA, which some of those terms are still very loosely defined. So I think we're going to have to come up with a standard on technology and how that all kind of fits, at least in the background, and then let people evolve on top of that. Because right now it's really hard to evolve on top of it when you don't know if your foundation is right.
Damien, just go back to the relationship thing again, right? It's interesting that you have an ambivalent relationship towards the agency. You've pretty much I wouldn't call it a hateful attitude towards technology, but a distrusting attitude towards technology vendors. And obviously technology and data now is a big piece of what marketers do. Would you like to see the agency evolve to build tech and offer that service layer on top? Because obviously you have all these enterprise guys like Oracle and Adobe, etc., who build tech, and there's no service. The service is shit, right? That's just the bottom line. They're enterprise, so that they don't provide that. So would you like to see the agencies evolve to build tech and offer that service, and obviously have that trust factor there as well?
Yes, of course. Let me clarify. There's no hate. It's all love.
No
it's
hate.
just trust.
No.
Yeah.
Distrust
Thank
is the
you.
word I was looking for.
So I think the first thing is clients want to build it themselves. So if they can. However, that's dependent on three things. Have you put the investment into data-driven marketing? So that's usually in the form of digital. So if that's a significant portion, done. Second, is there available budgets, which is rare? And three, is there available headcount? So generally that's a no. So if that's the case, we then go to agencies and say, can you build up our DMPs or our data technology stacks? So if that's the case, we don't really care where the vendor comes from, whether it's in-house proprietary stuff the agency puts together, or whether it's a suite of the best practice technology vendors, but we don't want to manage it. So we'll trust our agency to do that on our behalf, as long as we have free and easy access to data at all times. What we don't want to do is actually make data a blackmail point. So if Kevin builds up something and says, okay, now it's my agency's, I don't want to give it to you, then we have a dispute. But if I put all this investment in for them to actually build this technology stack, they've got a tool they can use for other clients, we're paid for the headcount, then we should at least be open about how we can use that data.
Evan, are you going to build an ad server? Like sit at home coding? And you're like, no?
Two.
I could just imagine it typing some code.
Oh, yeah. I think if you asked us that question 2 years ago, we might have said yes. But I think there's a core competency here. You know, I make a reasonably good pasta, but don't ask me to make Indian food, you know. So, and I think it's the same when it comes to media agencies. We do certain things very well. From us, we look at a kind of a build, partner, buy philosophy here. There are certain things that we will build. There are certain relationships that we like to have with tech partners that we're not getting just the vanilla product that you'll sell to everybody else. We want to partner with you. We want elements of it that are bespoke to us. And in certain circumstances, we will buy an off-the-shelf product. But I think we're more leaning into that partnership side of things now, whereby we will have longer-term relationships with key vendors where we'll be able to tweak the product that they are using.
But is your frustration similar to Damien's in the sense that some of these ad tech companies come and go, and then you develop these relationships, and next thing they're acquired by a big media company, and then you just can't work with them because they're conflicted on some shape or form? And I mean, there's numerous examples have happened that over the years. So is that a frustration for you?
Yeah, it's absolutely. Like, you don't want to invest time building relationships with anybody for that to be gone. It just decreases your productivity, and you have to start again. I think it comes down to who you actually work with, and trying to build that relationship that you think will have some longevity to it. But things happen. You just have to kind of acknowledge and move on.
Your relationship with agencies, Zachary, is it complicated? Is it complex relationship?
No, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, most of our relationships, most of our work comes from agencies, and certainly on the tech stack, on the API front, you know, we've now got a whole API unit because the client demand was to build something that's a little bit different, something that differentiates the offer or certainly the agency offer from what's out in the marketplace. So in response to client demand, we've got a whole area that does just that. And that can be everything from a full stack DSP, like Rakuten have built their Japanese language, totally different from ours, totally different UX, to a simple dashboard pulling in some data that the client wants to see. So it's everything and anything in between, I think.
Yeah. Ryan, obviously, OpenWeb are a rare breed of a company.
Yeah.
Actually, if there was, you know, a true technology company in this entire space, you would be it. Like, so how do you view this? I mean, I'm sure you're talking to some agencies, you're talking to marketers, you're talking to everybody.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's your perspective?
Well, I think it's just different conversations depending on the, you know, what they want, right? So, you know, a direct client or an agency, when we talk to them about your platform, if, like, you know, you said custom earlier, right? Like something completely customized to what your needs are. That's certainly something that we can talk about. But, you know, for different tech providers and players, a lot of times BidSwitch is actually a really good solution for that, right? Where we aggregate all of the, you know, hundreds of SSPs out there for you to come on board, so you have to do one integration instead of 100.
There's value there, Damien.
Yeah.
Plug and play.
Yeah. So I think that's our value proposition to the market, is that kind of that two sides of it. And even on the supply side with publishers, right, we help them kind of evolve into programmatic, where, you know, before they may be using something like AdSense or doing kind of more direct sales, but coming onto a platform like BidSwitch, where you all of a sudden have, you know, 100 of demand partners, you know, that can see your inventory. I think that marketplace is what we're trying to really evolve and invest in, rather than kind of saying, oh, you know, let's build another platform, right?
Yeah. So I think we've got like a couple of minutes left, but I'll finish with Damien, because, like, you know, we have this clash of technology ecosystems. I mean, from a marketer's perspective, what do you want to see from the ecosystem that will make your job easier? Well, like, the final thought for the panel.
I think final thought and understanding. I guess number one, try to understand what my objectives are. Really, you know, it's we talked about growth at the beginning, and, you know, often marketers are not really remunerated or going to get a promotion based on things like retention. They're often they have a tactical KPI about reducing costs, but again, I've never seen someone promoted into CMO by cutting costs. But I have seen people get that massive promotion from CMO to CEO by actually driving growth. So generally, if you understand those KPIs of the person you're dealing with, then that changes the entire conversation. I think second, understand the resources available. If you ask really, really nicely, some marketers will show you their budgets, or at least give you an estimate of how much they've got to spend. Some people often come in saying, okay, you're at a bank, I want $100 million from you, therefore I'm going to give you this amazing technology stack. I really have $100 million to play with, but understanding, whether you can actually
Why don't you just buy the company for 100 million?
Maybe we can do a venture on the side. But often things like pilots getting away with 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 on something, then they can open up to a wider tranche of money in the future is important. I think the third thing is really understand the trust factor between the relationships. So I always work with our agencies. So actually having me and our agency at the table makes sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you're a tech vendor going into the agency and selling one thing, then as soon as you get a sniff that a client wants to go direct, you start going to the client direct. It really kind of annoys the agency. I'm sure it's going to annoy the client. So really getting a sense of maybe the three parties can come together and discuss something rather than, any other option might be better.
Gentlemen, thanks very much. Kevin, Zach, Ryan, Damien, thank you. A round of applause for a fantastic panel.